Guys, we talk a lot about home theaters, and when we talk about them, we often talk about, speakers and projectors and screen. But, there's a garbage in, garbage out problem with home theaters as well. I mean, you've got to have good quality source. How do you deal with that, Kevin, when you're talking to clients?
Such a great point, right? And especially when you talk about home theaters, we're talking about enormous screen sizes, something that might be 120, 150 inches. And you're taking this content that we would typically look at on a smaller TV. Small TV is relative anymore. Maybe in a family room might be 55 inches or 65 inches in TV size. And now we're doubling that. And it's the same content, the same resolution, but in a much larger format. And so definitely important to talk about the content and where we're getting that content and what that looks like as we get into bigger screen sizes.
Yeah, I don't know that I noticed this until I had an 85-inch TV in my theater. So my practical example, which as everything else goes back to soccer when Kevin and I are talking, is I will a lot of mornings start watching soccer downstairs so that when the family comes down, we're all in the same room. And that's on a 55-inch TV, and it's usually streaming over an Apple TV, and it looks great. It gets near the end of the game. I kind of want to be able to watch it in private. If it's a close game, I'll go upstairs in the theater and watch the exact same stream on an 85-inch TV. And I don't know that if I started on the 85, it would look bad to me. But going from the 55, where it's all very sharp, going to an 85, and now all of a sudden that small number of pixels and that small amount of data is stretched over a bigger screen, the quality is substantially worse. And it's a nicer, more expensive TV in a better room on better equipment. But because I'm starting with that streaming, Apple TV signal, you stretch that to an 85-inch TV or 110 or 120-inch screen, it degrades quickly. It's shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much data coming out. So the bigger the screen size, the more pixels you've got. Sometimes the televisions, can extrapolate and they can go 1080 to 4K or 4K, even to 8K, because I don't believe there's any great 8K content out there yet. But at some point, they have to make up for the fact the data isn't there. Do you find people complain about the upscaling? Do they even see it, do you think?
Okay, so I always think back to like when we went from standard definition
Hmm.
TV to high definition TV, and we had this moment in time where we had 480 lines of resolution. We were putting it on 1,080 lines of resolution, and normal television that wasn't high definition looked substantially worse. Right? It was a
No, it
terrible
looked
experience.
terrible. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was unwatchable.
it was unwatchable. And then when you flipped it over to a high definition channel, it was like this crystal clear window in your room that you were looking into this amazing experience that we'd never had before. And so I don't think we're that bad, right? We're not at that level as we get to it. And so as we look at these bigger images with this content that's coming in, we absolutely have a better experience than what we had in the past. I don't think we're broaching the right experience. There is still a level above what most people experience from an Apple TV or a Roku or some sort of a streaming kind of thing coming in, where you can get better quality images and a better experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just don't know until you've had that experience to understand what that looks like. And
Uh,
so, yeah.
I think that's a really important point, which is so I had two friends when I was in my early 20s when HD first came out that went and bought an HD TV, and they had, a couple of channels that were HD. And we were sitting around having lunch, and they said, I cannot watch anything that's not HD anymore. And I was like, you're being ridiculous. Like, it's not that big of a problem until you experience it and you try and go backwards, right? You didn't know it was that bad until you really experienced it good and then took a step back. And I think this is one of those things where uh, most of our clients have a nice theater with good equipment. And because streaming was so new and because it drove the price of watching movies down so ridiculously low, it was hard for us to recommend something that was a more expensive, option. And I think we'll probably talk about Kaleidescape in a little bit, but that is a higher price point and it's a slightly different experience than the convenience of streaming. And if all you've ever had is streaming with that audio that seems good compared to maybe watching your TV downstairs and video that seems good compared to watching something on your phone, you assume that you're getting a good experience. But once you've actually seen what your equipment can do, if you put the right gas in it, which in this case is our source, it's a fantastic experience. And it is really hard to go back. I mean, I had a Kscape in my house for a couple weeks. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to return.
All right, well, we'll get to Kscapes in a minute. It's interesting, by the way, if you have a lot of the streaming services, if they recorded that original TV footage on film, then they can, scan it in and it looks okay in high definition. And then you've got the 18, which they seem to record on 8-track or 8mm or something, which if you watch in 4:3 on a high definition television is a painful experience, despite, the world has changed a lot since the 18. So I did some research, and we better talk about networking because at the end of this, because I think some of this is dependent on networking as well. But we talked a little bit about the amount of data. Though, do either of you remember how much data there was on a DVD? So that was the first time we all got, do you remember how many gigabytes DVD was?
Couldn't
I'm
even
gonna throw
guess.
Okay, so
4
it was
gigs.
4.7 gigabytes. Then the
Ooh.
digital side and stuff, but it was about 5 gig. All right. By the way, a VHS tape was 8 gig. So it was a lot more data, but that was a different reason. So a Blu-ray was 5 times a DVD. So you could get 25 gig on that. What's interesting is that's about the same as a 4K download on Apple TV. An 8K download is about 38 gig. So that's a lot more data. And then at the top of the range is something called a Kaleidescape. So someone explain, which is, by the way, is 100 gig, which is like 3 times an 8K download. So you talked about Kaleidescape. What is one of those, Keith?
So I don't know that I'm really the best person to describe it, but a Kaleidescape is a movie server. So unlike a streaming device, which is just able to show you content over the internet kind of in real time at a pretty darn high level of quality for what it's doing, a Kaleidescape, you're actually downloading that content. You can either buy it or rent it, but you're downloading that content on a server and watching it from your server just the same way you would watch from a Blu-ray. You just don't have the physical device. The obvious upsides to that are much, much higher quality, both in picture and more importantly to me in sound. Again, I watched Blu-ray content, or sorry, not Blu-ray, Apple TV streaming versus Kaleidescape with no sound in my theater when I was first installing it and thought, yeah, I can see a difference. And once I got everything turned on and the speakers fired up, shocking difference. I couldn't believe how much better of an experience that provided for me.
Yeah. We talk about Kaleidescape and Apple TV. We said some different things. When movie manufacturers master these movies, there were different products and services that were available where you could actually have like first run movies come into your house, but your theater had to be certified. And so like in these different areas and these different places, they had cinemas that were certified. It had to be the right kind of speaker system, the right kind of video display, the right kind of content that went out to it, and making sure that it was all done right so that they could get the experience the way that they intended and created that content that went to it. And so as that happens, right, and that happens at a high level very easily because we can sink a ton of money into stuff to get you to that level of that quality that you want. And so there were products like Prima Cinema and Red Carpet Cinema, and I think there's one called like Bel Air Theater now that offer these services and certification things that you can get it. And that level is unrivaled. It's truly non-compressed audio and video, so you get it exactly as it was intended and as it was filmed at that moment. When we step down from that level, we're going into other products, right? Because we have to get this into mainstream homes, right? What we see on TVs and what we see in theaters. And so the step down from that goes into Kaleidescape, which just has a significantly higher resolution, higher audio resolution. And we're not relying on that stream of internet bringing that content into you. It's taking it, it's storing it, and it's making sure that you have all the information you need when it's playing that coming out. Versus something like an Apple TV or a Roku or an Amazon Prime Stick or the different devices that are there that bring that content in, that's coming in real time. And there might be a small buffer range in there, but if your internet gets taxed because of the area that you're in has too much going on, or maybe your kids are playing a game somewhere else, or someone's doing a a Teams call or a podcast recording, all that stuff starts to consume that bandwidth. And that comes from the quality of the image that you're actually putting on that TV. And so it's a way where we can really look at what that looks like and how good that it
And
can
part of
be.
the other, yeah, sorry, part of the other part of the experience you get with something like Kaleidescape, the user interface is a beautiful, but it's also designed for movie watching, which is, I love the Apple TV device. That's what we watch at home in our living room, but it still feels like I'm a version of a PC or an iPhone, whereas I'm not getting that sort of movie UI interface. Keith, when you had it, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so we had one loaded with a ton of movies, and I find when I go on a streaming device, like let's say kids are out for a night and my wife and I want to watch a movie, it was always a matter of, well, let's go look at what's on Netflix. There's nothing there we really want to watch. Let's go check Apple. Let's go check, Peacock. And we're like bouncing around between all these different devices looking for something. And with the Kscape, it just does such a great job of making all of that content visible and available to you. So, we can put some video of just what that interface looks like over this. But what I really loved is you could constantly be reorganizing it based on type of movie or actor in a certain movie. And you could kind of, drill down on what you were interested in, but in just in the most beautiful way. Like it was just fun to look at and play with and surf through. And I think about like the first time you ever used an iPhone and you scrolled on the phone and it kind of bounced when it got to the bottom. Like that's normal now, but the first time you used it, it was like, whoa, this is cool. It's interactive. Like there's something unique about this experience. And to me, Kaleidescape kind of has that market cornered. Like they make it fun to look through your movies and to kind of go through your content in a way that, I don't know, like just has become so normalized. Like what your experience should look like as you interact with content. It becomes more of an experience. It's like while the popcorn's popping, you're enjoying surfing through, just looking for the movie, not even watching it.
Yeah. And to dive in even a little deeper, since we're talking Kaleidescape, the way they do their movies is it cuts out all the initial splash screens of different movie manufacturers and stuff like that, and it gets you right to the content. And so it's able to take you right to that moment because you're buying a direct license for that already, and so it gets you right to it. And when we've got an automation system and lighting control and maybe some a drapery panel that exposes the theater screen or something like that, we can tie in all those triggers at moments of when things happen. So when we hit a button that says pause the movie, the lights come back on for it. Or when when the movie opens up, the lights can dim down and things can kind of happen. And we can make that go deeper into it. In addition to, depending on the level of projector that you have, if you have a lens shifting projector, it'll modify, and a screen that matches that, it'll actually modify the aspect ratio for you automatically. You're not having to do anything on that. So you don't end up with bars on the top and bottom or sides of a screen. You get the full image exactly as it was intended to be viewed and heard.
And look, if you spend $1 million on your home theater, we've done $1 million, $500,000 home theaters. There's really no point having poor quality. Now, the Bel Air thing you talked about, which really is first run movies, I think it's like $4,000 a month subscription. So this is not.
Yeah, I think it's $100,000 for the hardware,
right,
plus $4,000 a month for the subscription. It's an investment.
Right. So this is not going to, replace your Paramount Plus necessarily or your Netflix license, but there is a chance, and people are nervous about going to public theaters, and COVID had an impact. So there's a market for this, and if you're interested, we'd love to help. But the cornerstone of all of that is, if you're going to download 100 gig or multi 100 gig movie, you're going to have the right network in the house. And so, configuring that network and sizing it, because people can get multi-gig lines in from the provider. But if your internal network doesn't work, Keith, it's not going to be any value to you, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And I would say, and Kevin probably has a similar experience, when you were trying to sell Kaleidescape, because it is one of the best sources we've had for a long time, it was a very hard value proposition for clients because the lack of convenience compared to this new streaming thing, or even driving to a red box and just picking up a movie on your way home. But it was hard to explain to somebody that, like, yeah, you want to watch this movie? Great. In 24 hours, it'll be available to you. Well, now with the internet speeds we're seeing, you could decide you want to watch a movie, go make popcorn, you know, make a drink. And when you come back, it's ready to go. And that's not going to be available to you if you're on, 10 gig or you have a really, really poor network. But if you have higher speeds now, the amount of convenience is just phenomenal. And it matches the rest of the experience we're talking about, which, I mean, this is all about experience, right? Like you can go watch the same movies on streaming, you could watch them on your phone. But if you were looking for that theater like experience or better than theater experience, this delivers.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we have to remember is that we're saying theater, right? Is that theater is emotional, right? The idea of going to the theater, the idea of having your family around you is to kind of experience things. Whether you're watching, The Greatest Showman or something like that, where you get all this music coming in and it just creates that atmosphere and that feeling. Things that we harken back to as kids. I remember going to the theater with my parents. I remember a Braveheart movie with my dad. It's one of my like best movie memories I have that I think about all the time and we still kind of laugh about. And so there are moments that are created by this. And so when we talk about an experience, it's truly an experience. And that experience really comes together when you get all of what was intended for it. It's how they designed it. It's how they created it. It's how they made it. And to be able to deliver that to somebody in the convenience of their home, the way that they can get that feeling and the memory of how that comes together, I think is something that really is special and that we can provide for people.
And, we talked to James Westbrook about two-channel audio and how great two-channel audio, you hear things that you won't hear on a poor quality recording. And the truth is, if you watch some of these things, you're going to see and hear things that you won't get any other way. So, if anybody's interested in any of these, upgrading their home theaters or new sources, would love to talk to them about it. But it's an adage of the garbage in, garbage out. Get the best quality source, you'll have, as Kevin says, the best experience.
Yeah. And it's not just for video files. Everyone that has the equipment will notice the difference.
That's right.